These are what's called the Tuscaloosa houses, and this would have been a farm. So this is Carl Bradley. Carl's our superintendent, and Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe is the foreman here on the job, and he's been responsible for taking these particular houses apart. What we thought we had was an original house on Spring Hill Avenue, an 1830s to 1840s house in the rear, late 1840s, early 1850s. The house on Spring Hill Avenue had burned, and so the homeowners came here in 1852 and built this house, the Georgian house here in the front. What we found was something different, and we wanted to make sure that we documented it completely now while we were still taking apart before we begin the move. In this area right here, you can see the plywood and stuff, but this was the rear porch entrance. There was actually a porch right here, in general confines to where the opening is now. And this siding very well may have been the original siding on this side of the house. When you come inside the house, where this entrance is from the outside, you see this clapboard here on the side, this red clapboard. And you can begin to tell that this is original clapboard. And this door frame here, and we believe this door frame are both original door frames for this house. So we originally had thought this was a porch coming around the house, the entire house. But when we began to find this, when Bobby began to find this, we began to question whether or not our premises were correct.
From those studs, it shows that there was clapboard siding here with a wall here showing that this was a porch. Inside the wall is showing that you had wood lath siding and horsehair plaster between it, which actually leaves the lines on the studs with a much tighter pattern.
Typically in the 1820s, this very probably was not a kitchen, because the kitchen would have been outside because they were scared to death of the heat and scared to death of fire, but really the heat. So they would have had the kitchen outside. But later, as you can see with the hole up in the ceiling here and the plaster around the hole, that was a vent for the stove. And you can also see the 45-degree angles here with the studs so that they got all the strength in the building. That today we would call that hurricane proof. But back then they put it together, and you can see how they notched out here and back in here. A lot of labor going into that kind of work. Now you come into this room, this is another cabinet here, and we thought this was an added room. We thought that this was a porch originally, and that these walls were just added because they were all covered with sheetrock. Once we got in here and Bobby started uncovering it, tell us what you found here, Bobby.
We actually found original studs, obviously matching the rest of the house. And then also this door frame they had made much smaller and inserted another door in it, but we also found an original door frame here as well.
Now in this door, this is a Creole door, and it's clearly 1820s. It has the cross at the top. It's called a cross and Bible door. A cross at the top and an open Bible at the bottom. And this door was no longer made around 1830s. It's the quality of construction for a Creole cottage, a fine Creole cottage. This was a real exceptional, wealthy family that built this simple house to be on this farm out here. So what we found was this porch is original, and we really were pleased to find this 45-degree cuts here on the floor in this corner, and that's really the first time that we began to think that this was something other than a garçonnier, when we began to find this 45-degree angle and this quality of construction here. And that was one of the things that we had difficulties with, because in order to move the house, we can only have certain width to going down the street. And we had a 12-foot tall roof, and so we had to take that roof off because it was too tall to move down the street. And when we took the interior walls out, you can now see these columns that are here. And those are original columns. Originally, we thought it was a garçonnier, which is what they had told us they thought it was. But once we got here and began to realize, and what Bobby started finding, we brought them back out here again, and they're just amazed. Because what they say now is that it's very possibly the oldest house in Mobile, and probably the second oldest house in Mobile that's surviving. The other being a pharmacy right down the street here, a couple of blocks, that's been preserved now by the city and made into a pharmacy museum. We found these on the outside of the house. They were still attached to the house, but they were on the outside. But they actually fit on these windows. And we have a number of these. So these look like what very well may be the original shutters for this house, which would be unheard of to be able to find those. Because there was no Tuscaloosa Street when this house was built. There was no subdivisions behind us here. This was a raw territory. They came here, there was trees everywhere. They cut the trees down. They milled them into wood and used those trees to build this house. We're going to try to preserve all of this. We're going to take all of this floor up individually and then put it all back. That's what Bobby's committed to do, and have this house restored exactly the way it was. Now, if you'd like to enter the house again, so this is one of the two living rooms. The experts tell us that they could alternate which would be a living room and which would be a bedroom according to what you're trying to do with the house. When the house out front burned, the family living there decided they had to build a new house. You can see where they've added this Georgian finish, this Georgian entrance. You can see the height, and then they have the skylights above it. And that was where they connected to this new house they built in 1852. And that's a Georgian house. They built it in a period, so they built it the way it was for that period. And they had a set of stairs going down. They built it down almost at ground level, so you had about a 4.5 foot, 5 foot difference to walk upstairs here. So this has two original wooden mantles we've saved, and we've saved all the brick. You can see it sitting around the property, all around the property here. I don't know how many bricks we have, but thousands and thousands of brick, and we've saved every brick, and we're taking them with us, and we're going to use the original brick. And we've separated the brick for this 1820s house and the fireplaces for the 1850s house and all the pillars. So all the brick will be separated, so each house has its original brick. Well, I think this is the 67th house we've done. Yeah, we did about almost 50 of them in New Orleans back. And the oldest one I ever did in New Orleans that I know about was 1840s. And I did that for my own house, 1840s cottage, double cottage. We're now underneath the old house, the old Tuscaloosa house. And so what we found was these original beams, which are heart pine beams. And what are these, Carl? What size are these, or Bobby?
Those are 10 by 10s.
10 by 10s. So this is 10 inches by 10 inches. I'd said it a little bit larger before because I'm thinking they're bigger, but that's all right.
No,
So,
10 by 10.
But there you can see them, and they go all the way across the whole house. So they're 30 feet, 35 feet long. And to find a beam like that today out of a heart pine, one pine tree, today they'd be made out of 1,000 pine trees and all put together with glue and like a plywood, laminated. And then what we have here is we have the same kind of beam going all the way down to the end of the house down here on this side. So you can see it all the way down to the back. And the reason for this 45 is because the porch has to be sloped. And so they had to get a slope, but they also wanted to keep the slope in the corner. And so they could have just come and made it kind of cockamamie, or they could have done this quality construction here, and which is just out of this world. And so we wanted to make sure that we maintained this, and we replaced it. And there was only one way to do it, not cut anything. We have to take it apart and number it and then put it back together the same way it is. And that's what we plan to do. So these are original pillars. And as you can see, this one over here is leaning just slightly, but that's where they had the steps. And this was the front door right here. Is that right, Bobby? This right here.
Steps would have went up here.
They'd gone right up to the top here. So you can see I'm 6 foot with my boots on. Used to be 6 foot without them, but now I'm 6 foot with them. And but you can see the floor of this is right at 6 feet. So this is the front of the 1852 Tuscaloosa house. And I wanted to bring you out here because of the style. You can see it's a typical Georgian style. But if you'll notice, the front is not the clapboard, it's plaster. And that's extremely expensive to do on the exterior of a house and very rare. So we enter the front door. Look at these massive windows here. I mean, they're just beyond belief. This ceiling is 12 foot 9 inches tall, which is unheard of. And the primary reason it's that tall, 11 foot is big, 12 foot is massive, 12.9 is, I'm not sure I've been in a house 12.9 like this, but it matches the house, the height of the ceiling in the rear. And that's the reason they added a little bit extra height. All of these doors are original. In fact, if you'll look at this glass here, this is the original glass. And the pocket doors work. although they're a little bit rough, which is very unusual when you find an old house like this that's been sitting vacant for many, many years to still have the pocket doors, because one of the first things people steal. These are some of the tallest that you've ever seen in your life. Carl, do you have a tape? How tall are these doors?
9 foot 10 and a half.
Yeah. 9 foot 10 and a half.
Tall doors.
Yeah. So now they're also thinner than lots of doors I've seen. And you can still see the original boards. These are the original floorboards, and how wide they are and beautiful. We're going to maintain all of that and restore this. And then you can see the original sides here. It's all pine here, all original. It's going to be the history of Mobile rebuilt.